on absent or on official council business. Mr. Tobin. Okay, members, so we have 5 apologies tonight. Councillor Tony Clues, who's going to be substituted by Councillor Davey, Councillor Downs, who's substituted by Councillor Farrell, Councillor Bell, who is substituted by Councillor Mrs Humphreys, Councillor Mr Derricks, who is substituted by Councillor Rose, and Councillor Jarvis, substituted by Councillor Simmons. So can I just check that you're all happy with that? I'd like to do that by just indicating if you are not happy. Thank you very much. I'll take it that those apologies are all accepted. And welcome to Councillors Davey, Farrell, Mrs Humphreys, Rose and Simmons. Agenda item number 2 is disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests. Does anyone have any interest that they would like to disclose? Please do so by raising your hand in the relevant part of the agenda. I can't see that we have any interest to declare, so we move on to... oh, sorry, Councillor Farrell, I can see you've indicated.
Not interest, I'm just getting deafened by someone not muting their microphone and I can't hear a word he's saying.
Okay, if everyone could be sure to mute themselves, that would be helpful. So the next item on the agenda is application number 20 for land to the northwest of Newton Regis Village Hall. Members, we have 2 speakers this evening, the first of whom will be Mr. William Brearley. Mr. Brearley, before I invite you to speak... Oh, sorry, Mr. Brearley, I'm advised it's Diane Radburn who is speaking first. So, Ms. Radburn, before I invite you to speak, I'd just like Mr. Brown to introduce the report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application, as you can see, for the lands west of
we can't hear anything from Jeff. He was really quiet.
I agree with that. Can't hear a thing.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, Jeff, that's much better.
Okay, thank you, Cass. I don't know who just started. This is the first slide. The application site is the area outlined in red, as you can see here. This is the road that comes up from Wharton into Ostry. The village school is here with the church and village pond down here. The village hall is here, and the application site, as you can see, not only includes the land, the arable land in this particular part of the site here, but also includes the village hall. This is Townsend Close, which is referred to in the report, where several of the objections have come from. Can't slide it on. Yes, it's moving now. Thank you. This is an outline application for up to 9 dwellings, and the plan that you see now is an illustrative layout for that 9, with a line of houses here reflecting parallel to the existing properties in Townsend Close. And then also, more recently, the applicant has provided more detail of the actual access arrangements into the site, as you can see here. With the access being on the outside of the bend, this being the village hall car park, which will be enhanced. And you can see some of the materials that the applicant is wishing to use on the access arrangement, as you can see here, with the 2 rumble strips along part of the length of the road, and this being the new access into the village hall. So, Mr. Chairman, members will know that this particular application was referred to the planning board under the temporary scheme of delegation, which the council agreed back in May. And that ended up with the chief executive deferring the determination so that further discussions could be held with the parish council. And as you can see from my report, those meetings did take place. The key issues that were raised in those meetings were to do with access and also whether alternative sites should be considered. As a result of the meetings, I referred back to the county council because the county council had said that they had no objection to the application. I referred it back to the county council with a number of points as raised by the parish council at that meeting, the county council, as you can see, have come back saying no further objection. They have gone into detail, as I can see from the report, as to the reasons why, and they have reiterated that the appropriate road safety arrangements audits were undertaken at the time, particularly in relation to one of the access points from number 16 onto the new access drive. So the appropriate road safety audits were undertaken, and that did not reveal or lead to any particular issues which would lead to the county council resulting in an objection. On the alternative sites, then clearly the report refers to these matters. And again, I just reiterate, Mr. Chairman, that the application has to be determined on its own merits. It's not the place for this board to allocate land or to consider the merits of other sites. Those sites all have issues, planning issues, heritage issues, highway issues. So therefore, they should not be considered as part and parcel of the determination of this particular application. Members will have received, I think at the end of last week, a statement on behalf of the objectors. That came in over the weekend, and that was circulated to members by email. Today, I have had 3 further letters of objection from people who have already objected to the application, and they just reiterate and emphasise the points that have already been made, and those are contained in the report, in the supplementary report, and in Appendix A. I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman, and come back on any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So we now move to our first speaker, who is Ms. Diane Radburn. Ms. Radburn, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Tobin.
Hello, Mr. Radbourne. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. In a moment, I'll start the timer and tell you as it started. I'll then remind you when you have 1 minute left, and then if you could round up to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, your 3 minutes starts now.
Newton Regis is a Category 4 settlement. New development should not go beyond the outlined local plan. The proposed development lies outside of the existing development boundary on Grade 2 agricultural land, which is not designated for development in the current local plan. The 5-year supply of land availability and the required 20% buffer has already been fulfilled within the area. As I am sure you are aware, to build outside of the settlement boundary on land that is not brownfield but of food quality requires a proven and justifiable need for additional housing. It could be argued that even though the 5-year plan has been fulfilled in this area, there is still a wider housing shortage. This may be correct. However, this proposed development is not one of affordable homes or social housing. It is 9 executive homes. The applicant has not provided any justifiable argument that there is a proven need for this type of development, or provided any acceptable reason why development of this type should be given permission to be built outside of the development boundary. The development of this site will have a significant impact on the amenities of the local residents. 21 houses on Manor Farm have recently been granted planning permission. That alone will impact on a small village with very limited infrastructure. The required distance between the houses is 22 metres. They are providing 30, not out of respect for the privacy of the established houses, simply because the new plots will not fit within 22 metres. Also, the land is some 2 metres higher than the position of the houses on Townsend Close. This development will cause a significant loss of privacy, overlooking and overshadowing. Despite highways having concluded that there is no issue with the road and pedestrian safety, we who live here have serious concerns over the safety of an already dangerous junction and bend. Just last Friday, a car drove too fast into the sharp bend and ended up on the opposite footpath. Pure luck, no one was injured. There are still concerns about the safety of vehicles entering Village Blessing 16 Osprey Lane, and also the
You have 1 minute remaining.
manoeuvring of large vehicles and queuing traffic. In conclusion, the applicant has not provided any justifiable need for executive homes to be built outside of the development boundary on land that is of food quality in an area where the 5-year supply has already been fulfilled. We do not accept that this development will improve the infrastructure of the village. The recent planning permission has granted will impact on the already fragile sustainability of Newton Regis. The amenities of the local residents will be severely compromised. Out-of-date framework should not be used as leverage to get applications passed. Until a new framework is provided or the current frameworks are made obsolete, they're still there to provide guidance in planning matters. We do not believe the road safety issues have been properly addressed or the concerns of the residents have been listened to. This application states that the small development of 9 houses will not cause any increased harm to the settlement, a totally dehumanised statement. Therefore, we strongly urge
Your time ends there.
for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradburn. Members, does anyone have any questions for our speaker? I can't see any hands, so Ms. Bradburn, thank you very much indeed. Members, we now move on to our second speaker, Mr. William Brearley. Mr. Brearley, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Mr. Brearley. As for the last speaker, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll tell you in a moment when your 3 minutes starts, and I shall remind you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you.
Your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. As set out in your report, the application site lies on the edge of, but outside the village boundary. The weight to be given to settlement boundaries has been discussed in several appeal decisions. The conclusions made in those decisions is that settlement boundaries are out of date, but the hierarchy of settlements and broad distribution of growth can be given due weight. In that respect, housing outside village boundaries is not unacceptable as a matter of principle. This view was taken by the council on recently granting outline planning permission for 21 dwellings on land at Manor Farm, also within the village. Your report goes on to explain that policy NW5, a policy which establishes the housing requirement and its distribution, expresses the housing requirement as a minimum, therefore accepting that housing above that allocated within the policy is possible, subject to other material considerations. These other material considerations are discussed in your report, and I'm aware residents have highlighted a range of concerns. In respect of highway safety, no objections have been raised by the Highway Authority who assessed the transport statement and road safety audit. Even accounting for the revised access into the village hall car park, traffic would be light and slow moving. Visibility was also considered to be acceptable. The illustrative layout shows how a scheme of 9 dwellings can be accommodated whilst respecting neighbouring amenity. Residents have suggested that the new homes would sit between 2 and 2.5 metres higher than homes on Townsend Close. The submitted topo survey shows levels are between 30 centimetres and 1 metre higher from the rear boundary of Townsend Close to where homes might be built. With separation distances of some 30 metres achievable, and with conditions covering finished floor levels, it is submitted that neighbouring amenity can be adequately safeguarded.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Residents have raised concern with the assessment of alternative sites. The other sites are considered to raise greater issues of landscape heritage and other matters. Whilst there may be solutions to some of these, it's submitted that the proposed site remains the preferable location in planning terms. And as has been outlined to you today, the council are required to consider the application against policy, not to compare it against other sites. In respect of the school pick-up and drop-off, I'm aware there's an existing situation with on-street car parking and the conflict this creates for residents. This is an existing situation which is not created by or made worse by the proposed development. The works of the village hall car parking, the lighting and footway enhancements are hoped to have a beneficial impact in any event by attracting more residents and parents rather to park there rather than on the road. No other harm is identified. that would warrant refusing the application. On that basis, I would respectfully ask that members support the recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Your 3 minutes ends there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burley. Do any members have any questions for Mr. Burley?
Mark, can you hear me?
I can.
I actually was going to ask the question of the resident, but actually my screen went blank just as you moved on. And the one reason, the question I was going to ask the resident, if I may now, because we've moved on, is I've had quite a few residents really concerned about traffic. And I'm just wondering, there's, to my knowledge, been no fatalities, but there are significant accidents that happen on that corner, including a write-off the other day on Friday. I'm just wondering how the resident, why the residents are actually focusing on the amount of traffic and issues on that corner. I wonder if I can ask that question.
This is somewhat unusual, Councillor, because we've moved off the resident on to Mr. Burley. So I'm sorry. I need to.
Okay, I understand that, but then the screen went blank, so the system doesn't work. I'll speak about that at another time. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burley?
I do, please.
Councillor Mrs. Humphrey.
Please, Mark. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Braley. You say that the alteration to the car park will have no impact on the school, but the entrance to the car park now is to the side in the lane, which means the school bus cannot use the car park now to stand and turn. So this means the coach is going to be in the road. So have you looked at that impact that that's going to have on that corner entrance?
Thank you for that, Mrs. Humphries. We've, I mean, I visited a couple of times during the morning and afternoon pick-up times, and my observations, and I'm sure you and residents will, of course, see otherwise, was that certainly when I was there, the coach turned within the junction. Didn't go into the car park, turned within the junction, and then pulled up alongside the school. On the occasion I was there, now of course, you know, you will know more than I. The access that we have designed has been tracked such that we don't change that situation, so that a coach could turn within that junction. Now, clearly, Warwickshire County Council, I suspect, would not encourage that, and you know, as I say, we're not designed it necessarily to meet that requirement, but we have ensured that, if you like, that ability has been maintained. In terms of a coach parking, as I say, in the car park, I mean, you know, I don't know whether how often they do park in the car park, but you know, as I say, I mean.
Sorry, Will, I'm losing you quite a bit during this conversation. I know it's very hard with this Teams, but it is hard. It's just putting that to points forward that I don't think that the traffic has been looked at properly. I'm sorry. I've been there when the school bus has been there. The ordinary bus has turned up. Children have been turned up with cars to pick up from that area, and it has been chaos. So I can't ever agree on that situation.
But if I may, Chair. I mean, as I said in my presentation, that's the situation that exists, and I'm not downplaying that. You know, that situation may exist. What I'm saying is that, you know, a scheme of 9 dwellings, in terms of the traffic that generates, that doesn't necessarily make that worse. That existing situation. We have done our best to try and improve the village hall car park for a range of reasons, and hopefully that may attract residents and make it more attractive for them to park with better lighting, better surfacing, and better access, pedestrian access. But the existing situation we can't be responsible to solve, you know, with respect. So, you know, as I say, existing situation, we don't, in my opinion, make that worse. And I suppose that's as much as I can add to that.
Yeah, let's hope that the children walking from the new houses to the school don't get injured. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons? You're still on mute, Councillor Parsons.
Are you getting me okay? Yes.
It's breaking up, but yes.
Yes. Question for Mr. Braley, basically. You mentioned, Mr. Braley, that you'd actually been and observed the school bus. Can you tell me when that was? Was it prior to the March lockdown or during the lockdown when things would have changed dramatically?
Thank you, Councillor. It was significantly before the coronavirus outbreak, and I haven't got the date, but I have my calendar here, so if you want me to try and find that date, but it was certainly before the coronavirus outbreak.
No, that's fine. I'll accept your assurance on that. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do any other members have any questions? I can't see any hands up. In which case, Mr. Beardy, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Members, we now move into the discussion on the application. If you could indicate by raising your hand who would like to speak, who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Farrell.
It's not working, is it?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is quite a difficult application, mainly because of the potential benefits to the village hall car park and to the £40,000 unilateral undertaking, which I know is not part of the application, but still clearly is in the minds of people that sit on the planning board. I'm not opposed to what are essentially quite small scale developments in villages like Newton Regis. I happen to live in one in Austria just down the road, but I think taken with the huge number of homes that are being built all around this area, you have to look at it as a cumulative impact on local people. Newton Regis is a village without a shop. Its only service really is a pub and a play area, and I don't think that it is worth losing a development boundary for some new swings and slides. So I will come up with the actual planning reasons if I make a recommendation later. But at the moment, I'm minded to not support this application.
Councillor Phillips, I see you next. Councillor Phillips, you're on
Thank you,
mute.
Chair. I'm just trying to find my way around the system. Yes, Chair. I've got problems with this. I'm never sort of keen on the argument that it's just 9 here. It tends to be 9 here and 9 there, and the smaller villages. And I think exceptions should be made, perhaps for affordable houses. But I'm not just keen on sort of, like I say, 9 houses here and 9 houses there. I think that more weight should be given to the policy on hierarchy. I think it's NW12, isn't it? And as I say, I'm not minded to support this at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is, as has been said, it's quite a challenging development given what's gone on already in the villages and related development ban. So I think for me personally, it would be something I'd want to go and see whether or not the issues that Councillor Humphreys brought up in relation to traffic and parking, so I could actually see those and visualise those for myself. I think seeing it on the plans is one thing, but actually seeing it in situ really helps cement a view.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simmons. So that's a proposal.
Mark, can I actually? I've been trying to get on. I'm very sorry, but my screen keeps going blank, and I wasn't able to ask the question. But I was going to suggest that it's so confusing what's going on here. Is it if Councillor Simmons is proposing a site visit, I would second that. I think it's vitally important, we actually go and see what's going on there, not only for the traffic, see what, all the effect that it's going to have on the village. And I'm a bit disappointed the way this system's working at the moment. So if she's proposing that, I will second it.
Thank you very much. So it's been proposed and seconded for a site visit. Councillor Parsons, I've got you down to speak, but ordinarily we'd move straight into a vote on the site visit. Would you like to speak before we do that, or are you happy to wait for a site visit?
I think I'd like to speak before, if I may, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure of the need for a site visit in one sense. I mean, I may be wrong on that. I mean, it seems to me that this application doesn't really benefit this village. There's no element of affordable housing in it. It brings simply, more expensive homes into a village that probably, well, I think does need more affordable homes. It crosses the existing building boundary, and I mean, I am just not minded to support this actual, this development. And for those, I don't think it's, as it stands, a benefit to the readers. So, I mean, I would suggest that I don't think we need the site visit, is what I'm saying. Okay.
Okay. And Councillor Fowler-Sinley, would you like to speak, or are you speaking against the site visit as well?
Well, I wanted to speak. Again, I'm not an expert on planning, it's only my second planning meeting this year, but I wondered if it was in order to move an amendment to the proposal that has been put forward by Councillor Simmons and seconded by Councillor Humphreys, and that is that you delete that we defer for a site visit, and that we put in there that we refuse the application on the grounds that it conflicts with NW2 and NW12.
I think, well, I'd prefer you to simply vote against the site visit, and then if that's carried, then we can move into a formal recommendation of refusal if that's what you wish to do. But if you could bear with us, and we'll vote on the site visit first and then see where we go after that.
No, sorry, Chair. I wondered if it was in order and whether you could ask the council's solicitor, rather than letting people get away with deferring it for a site visit. I think we should have a straight vote on whether this is an application that is something members want to support or not. It's already been deferred once. We should make a decision. So if it's in order, if an amendment is allowed in the Constitution, that's what I propose.
Mr. Tobin, could you give us some guidance?
Chair, with your permission, once a motion has been proposed and seconded, a vote should be taken on that motion before considering a further motion. This doesn't appear to be an amendment to that motion. This seems to be proposing a completely different recommendation from the report itself, and it isn't addressing the subject matter of the recommendation that was made for a site visit. So on that basis, I'd say we take this existing motion first, and then, depending on the outcome of that, consider whether the Constitution would allow a further motion to be made. Proposed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillips, you've raised your hand.
Chair, so it was just to say that I'm happy to support second Councillor Fowler's proposal if that was going ahead, but I will do so anyway, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rand. So it's now been proposed and seconded that we have a site visit. You've had legal guidance that is the way to proceed. So as we've done with previous members, motions will have a call vote simply because that's easier to determine the way forward. So we'll proceed to the vote. Mr. Tobin.
Councillor Lees. Councillor Lees.
Sorry, can you just clear what up?
So we're voting in favour or against having a site visit.
Right, thank you.
So, Councillor Lees.
For. Thank you. Councillor Moss. Councillor Moss, you've muted your microphone, so I don't know if you try to speak.
Sorry, I'm in favour for a site visit.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
For.
Thank you.
So members, that is carried, so we will now defer this item for further consideration after a site visit. Mr Brown will make the appropriate arrangements, but I suspect, given the need for social distancing, that it will be a private visit for you all to go on your own, but Mr Brown will be in touch with you on that at a later date. Members, we now move on to consideration of application number 56 for the Town Council offices, North Street, Atherstone. We have one speaker on that, Mr Martin Short, but Mr Short, before I invite you to speak, Mr Brown, would you introduce the report? Mr Brown.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As members are aware, this application was referred to your last meeting when it was deferred so that you members could visit the site. The site is highly accessible, both by foot, by car, and it can be visible from the road, and therefore members were encouraged to actually visit the site themselves rather than through a formal site visit. Members will see from the committee report that the plans are exactly the same. They haven't been changed as a result of the gap when the deferral for a site visit. Members can see the site visit, the site itself there outlined in red with North Street and the marketplace down here, and then the actual proposed replacement building is there. We've had further objections, Mr Chairman. You will have heard last time at the meeting an objector giving a statement. That statement has been repeated and circulated to members before this particular meeting. That was circulated in the last couple of days. The Atherstone Civic Society has also reiterated its objection to the proposal, and there has been one further objection which has come in this afternoon. I've not been able to circulate that, but clearly it repeats the matters that have been raised before by several parties. My supplementary report, Mr Chairman, attempted to respond to the matters raised by objectors last time and by members at the last committee meeting. I just want to emphasise a couple of points as a result of that particular report. Firstly, on the highway issues, the National Planning Policy Framework, the necessary or the appropriate sentence in that document is in paragraph 109, which says that if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe, then the application should be refused. Now, clearly we have an objection from the County Council's Highway Authority. But that is only advice to you. And as I've indicated in the report, that should not carry full weight for several reasons. Firstly, because there is a lawful use at this particular premises for offices and as a meeting place, and this particular application falls within that lawful use. And that lawful use will definitely involve access into the site and people visiting the site with cars. There's existing parking arrangements used by using the car parks in the town. That will continue. The site is a sustainable location in the town centre, a short distance from those particular car parks. And also, members of the planning board will know that there have been significant numbers of refusals in the town centre, which have been recommended by the Highway Authority because of lack of car parking. Now, those particular applications have been approved because they are town centre locations. And therefore, for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I do not consider that there to be a severe impact in terms of road safety or cumulative impacts on the network, and therefore it doesn't follow that the NPPF should be the reason for refusal. Secondly, in the report, Mr. Chairman, the first report in the appendix, there's an exhaustive section on heritage issues referring to the Council's statutory requirements. And I think that would respond to the Civic Society's view about the lack of heritage consideration. Particular importance has to be given to the preserving and enhancing the significance of any heritage assets. And pages 3, 118, 119, 1110 of the previous report go into that at length. If there are particular concerns leading to a potential reason for refusal on heritage grounds, then it's imperative that the harm is identified and that the particular tests that are run through that device are undertaken. The issue here is that our own heritage officer has decided or concluded that there is less than substantial harm and that the greater weight should be given to the community benefit in the final planning balance. But that has been appropriately done in the previous report. A lot of discussion, Mr. Chairman, at the previous report on DDA. Indeed, members are reminded of the rights and interests of disabled people when determining application under the duty that they have. Disabled access here is capable of resolution. The report actually indicates that. We've undertaken further discussion with building surveyors, and they are saying that that interest can be resolved. That interest can be resolved and protected, and that's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, as we discussed last time, there was a condition recommended, which is condition number 5, which relates to looking at DDA elements. Therefore, as a result of site visit, Mr. Chairman, or site visit by members, and the supplementary report, the recommendation remains the same.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. As I mentioned earlier on, we have a speaker, Mr. Martin Short. Mr. Short, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Mr. Short. You'll have 3 minutes in which to address the board. In a moment, I shall tell you when your 3 minutes has commenced, and I shall then give you a reminder when you have a minute remaining. Okay, your 3 minutes will start now.
Right, okay. I'd like to focus on 3 different areas, namely the historical interest of the existing building, the highway issues I'm personally aware of as someone who lives close by, and some aspects of the unsuitability of the planned building. The current building itself, though not particularly attractive, is clearly unusual. If you Google Old Morgue or Old Mortuary, you'll find some reference to similar buildings in Plymouth and Rotherhithe, but not much else. It looks as though after the passing of various public health acts, including that of 1875, Atherstone, being perhaps more progressive than most towns, built a separate mortuary for found bodies, post-mortems and coroner's juries, rather than using a room in a pub. Furthermore, the custom began at this time to remove bodies to the morgue from the deceased's overcrowded home, where they constituted an obvious health risk. The building formed part of a complex including the police station, a well and the ice house which still exists underground. It appears on the 1887 Ordnance Survey map, so it seems like it was built about that time. I believe that a building like this should be restored and maintained as part of the town's heritage, with interpretive boards provided. It's possible that grants will be available for this. It could be used as an exhibition space and incorporated in the town trail. Importantly, as a point on a walking route around the town, it would be unlikely to increase traffic or parking problems. On the other hand, as someone who lives close by, I'm concerned about the impact of intensified use of this new building causing such highway issues. There are parking restrictions roundabout, with even the Bay and Ratcliffe Street being restricted to 1 hour during the day. Residents of Ratcliffe Road have found for years that however much the surgery extends its car park, their service road is the convenient choice for parking. Additional parking.
1 minute remaining.
Yeah, okay. Additional parking need would add to this nuisance. The junction between North Street and Ratcliffe Street is already dangerous, and I regularly have to brake for traffic emerging into Ratcliffe Street from the section of North Street where the morgue is located. Moreover, illegal parking on both streets on the corner outside Brighton House reduces visibility, particularly for traffic emerging from North Street in a westerly direction, leading to fairly frequent near misses. New building would simply be too small. The meeting room would have insufficient space to accommodate members of the public, in addition to the councillors and clerks, and the building as a whole would not be DDA compliant. Issues related to this, including the lack of safe and secure accommodation for mobility scooters, the unsuitability of the door configuration for the disabled toilet, and the apparent impossibility of providing a lift.
And your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Short. Members, does anyone have a question for our speaker? I can't see any hands in the relevant screen, so unless anyone says they can't do that, Mr. Short, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, we now move into the discussion. Who would like to start us off? Councillor Parsons. And you're still on mute, by the way.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I'm just unmuted. I do have concerns here. And basically, I just feel that this planning stage is going about it the wrong way. I'm looking at a report here from the Department for Communities and Local Government, the importance of good design. And it's, if I may just quote a little bit from it, it states, inclusive design acknowledges diversity and difference and is more likely to be achieved when it is considered at every stage of the development process, from inception to completion. However, it is often mistakenly seen as a building regulation issue to be addressed once planning permission has been granted, not at the planning application stage. Thinking at the design stage about how the completed building will be occupied and managed can overcome many barriers experienced by some users. Too often, the needs of users, including disabled people, older people and families with small children, are considered too late in the day. It would seem to me that this is to be a public building and actually to resolve these issues at a later stage is not what we should be doing. I cannot support this application for that very reason at this point in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I went on a site visit. I had a look at the building. It's very clearly in some level of state of repair required, and clearly doesn't offer the accommodation that the town council wish it to in terms of meeting space and offices, and therefore they've moved out into the borough council, as we're aware from the report. I think that it's been in operation there for quite some time. They've managed with some of the considerations that are in the report and the comments that have been made prior in terms of parking and it, you know, as a town centre site, in many town centres that's can be problematic, but there is public parking all around. I think the application is what it is, and looking at it and looking at report, I can't see a planning reason for refusal, particularly around, and I was just looking at the conditions set. I think the issues that have been raised in relation to the DDA are important, but obviously building regulations go hand in hand with planning permission, and you don't get planning permission and then are absolved from any building regulation responsibilities. They go concurrently. So the reasons and the conditions that have been set alongside this, particularly around the DDA, it says, you know, to ensure that development meets DDA requirements, that construction management plan condition to protect the amenities of occupiers of nearby properties. The no additional openings should be made other than on the plan, you know, in the interest of the amenity to the area. So all the issues that have been raised and that I've considered when I looked at it have been raised by, have been, you know, overcome by the conditions. So I cannot see a planning reason, whether or not it be the planning application people wanted to see, but I cannot see a planning reason for refusal. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation that planning permission is granted.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Having read the latest report, my views remain the same as they did at the previous meeting. You know, there remains an objection from the Highways Authority. If everything that Mr. Brown said was correct, then I'm struggling to understand why between the last meeting and this meeting, the Highways Authority were not consulted again or did not change their mind. I don't understand if this is simply part of the current use class. The Highways Authority weren't made aware of that and they could have withdrew their objection. I think, frankly, actually, this is a completely different sort of building to the one that is proposed at the moment. Not only is it different in that it's 2 stories, but it also includes community use of the building. And you have to remember, for 3 years, there has been no meetings at that building. There's been no need for members of the public and residents to park there. And as you go through the report, everything just seems to get batted away as if it is irrelevant. It says that, you know, the sequential tests should be given limited weight, yet the questions that were asked at the last meeting don't seem to have been addressed in terms of what was these reports and studies done into alternative accommodation. Do we as a planning authority now just take applicants' words for things without seeing evidence? You know, as far as I'm aware, the town council are currently being housed in a town centre location that's perfectly suitable for their use. In fact, Mr. Brown and some of the members are sitting in that building as we speak. So there clearly is availability of office space and meeting space within the town centre already. So again, we've seen no evidence and it hasn't addressed the issue that was raised at the last meeting. In terms of the heritage issues, I'm not a heritage expert, but you know, I've had correspondence from Addiston Civic Society and residents of Addiston that, you know, make very clear that if this is the ambition of Addiston Town Council, then, you know, frankly, it's pretty poor. But I accept that, and Councillor Simmons mentioned it, it's not about the application I would want to see, it's about judging the one that we've got. But from a heritage point of view, it doesn't, I don't think, match what should be our ambitions for Addiston. So I would move refusal on the grounds of the Highways objection.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Councillor Mawson. You're mute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's all right. I'm sorting my fingers out on this. My sausage fingers, it's very hard to press the right one. I have visited the site one of the times I went out to have a look, and it certainly hasn't changed my mind one iota from what I said last time. And to keep it simple, I agree with what Councillor Farrell said, and our second is
his amendment, or sorry, his proposal on highways objections.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was going to do the same thing. I haven't changed my view on this. I think it's a poor building. I think it's not suitable for the use they want it for, and I just think it's. I haven't changed my views on it at all, and I think we should vote against it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Caroline hasn't yet got a second, I'm happy to second hers.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Brown, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just to come back on Councillor Farrell's point, Mr. Chairman, the Highway Authority will look at the planning application and come in with its representations on a highway basis. It's not for the planning. It's not for the Highway Authority to balance planning considerations. That's this board's responsibility. So therefore, the fact that they have not referred to its lawful use and a fallback position is not surprising. It's for this authority, for this board, to balance what the Highway Authority is saying with the planning background, which I've done in the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, before we move to a vote on the two motions that we've had, does anyone else wish to speak? In which case, we've had a proposal that permission is granted from Councillor Simmons, seconded by Councillor Hayfield, and a proposal that permission is refused, proposed by Councillor Farrell and supported by Councillor Mawson. I heard Councillor Simmons first, so if you don't mind, we'll take that one first. And if that is granted, then we don't need to move to the second. But let's take the proposal from Councillor Simmons that permission is granted.
Chair.
Councillor Farrell?
Sorry, point of order. You might have heard the proposal, but you didn't hear a seconder. My motion was proposed and seconded first, but given that they're both the same thing and we're going to have the same outcome, and essentially mean the same thing, can we just? I'm happy to withdraw my motion and just vote against the approval. So it's all a bit fine.
Councillor Mawson, do you agree?
Yes.
Thank you very much. In which case, members, we now only have one proposal, which is that consent is granted. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
So against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
For.
Thank you, members. My maths means that is carried by one vote, so planning permission is granted. We now move on to the next item of business, which is application number 167 for Philongley Mount, Greenend Road, Philongley. We have no speakers on this item. Mr. Brown, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll get these slides up in a tick. But this is an application, as you can see, to vary an existing consent on a listed building or in respect of a listed building, and that is to do with a window on one of the elevations. We'll try and find the slide. Here we go. Philongley Mount is on the south side of Greenend Lane. The junction with the Meriden Road that goes in from Philongley to Meriden is over here on the right, and this is the road from Greenend Lane that goes up to the former, members may know, the former Potter's Poultry area, which is further up here. It's a substantial house, as you can see. The actual building with which we're concerned is the hatched area here, which is known as Griffin House, and the elevation which we're concerned, as you'll see in a minute on the photographs, is this elevation here on the left-hand side. There we go. That's the photograph of that particular elevation, Mr. Chairman, and the window with which we're concerned is the one in the centre, this one here. You'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that we've gone through the statutory duty in respect of listed buildings and heritage assets, and quite simply, the recommendation is that this is not appropriate on this particular building, on this particular location, and the recommendation is for refusal. But because this is retrospective, there's a second recommendation in respect of taking enforcement action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, would anyone wish to speak? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I had a look through the application and drove up the road that Jeff just mentioned as the elevation that is of concern. Because I read the report and frankly I thought there'd been a mistake. I understand there are rules and regulations that Jeff as a planner and the planning team have to follow, but this, in my view, would be the biggest waste of public time and money possible to seek to refuse this application and to then seek costs and alterations to the building. I mean, there's a line in the report that states quite clearly that it's considered that the gable window does not harm the immediate special architecture of the listed building, and the planning concern is the view from the road. I don't, in my view, think that is substantial harm to the designated heritage asset that paragraph 196 says, and therefore I would move that the application be accepted, be approved.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second that motion. I've looked at this and I'm usually genuinely agree with the preservation of listed buildings, and I think we do right. I mean, I think we do very well in NorthWarks protecting them, but I honestly can't see that this detracts from the building at all. I think it adds to it personally, but I know I may not be the best one to judge, but I think, as I say, I've got no problem with it, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else wish to speak? In which case we have a proposal that consent is granted and none that is refused. So, Mr. Brown, would you like to tell us what information you need in the recommendation to grant consent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As indicated on the previous application, I would need to know why, and well, can I start again? Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I would need to know the outcome of the balance, which I referred to earlier on. In other words, what is the community benefit that would arise that may not be outweighed here by the harm caused? Therefore, I need to know why the balance in this particular case is tilted the way in favour of an approval rather than a refusal. In other words, what is the level of harm caused and the balance against that, the balance of that against the community benefit?
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, I hear this whenever I come to planning, and when I've spoken to the councillors, actually, I don't think there is a legal responsibility for elected members to provide specific planning reasons under any particular part of legislation. I've never ever been aware of it before, and it only seems to be when you don't want to follow officers' recommendations. And I just think that I'm sure in that paragraph there is in that balance that Mr. Brown talks about, there is a section that says that protecting buildings for use in the 21st century so they don't fall into disrepair is actually part of a balance that's considered. But regardless, I would like to see the legal advice, the decision that says councillors have to do that in a motion, because it's not in our constitution. There's nothing in our constitution, the planning section, that requires a motion that I have just legitimately moved and has been seconded, that requires that evidence. Nothing whatsoever.
Thank you, Councillor. I completely agree with you. It's not in our constitution. As I understand it, it's a question of planning law. Mr. Tobin, could you provide some guidance?
Chair, there is a body of case law on this point, which deals with situations where members propose making a decision on an application which is contrary to legal advice. We have actually incorporated this into the Council's constitution. It can be found at page 194 under paragraph 11.1 of the Protocol on Planning Matters. And if I can read from that, the provision of, states, whilst in strict legal terms the Planning and Development Board is under no obligation to follow the advice of officers, Section 38, bracket 6 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 provides that any planning determination shall be in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Thus, there must always be clear and convincing planning reasons for the board's decision. If decisions are taken for non-planning reasons or for reasons which are not sustainable as an appeal, there is potential for an award of costs to be made against the council. Therefore, if the board makes a decision contrary to the officer's recommendation, whether that's for approval or refusal, a detailed minute of the board's reasons should be made and a copy placed on the application file. Officers should also be given the opportunity to explain the implications of the contrary decision before it is taken.
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, sorry, that didn't answer my question. My point was, Mr. Brown asked about a test, which he asked about because he knows that as a layperson, I wouldn't have detailed knowledge of the test. But me providing a planning reason, which I'm doing, I'm not saying approve it because it looks nice, but a planning reason, I think it complies with ENV 16 of the NorthWarks Local Plan 2016. Is that not what we're here for? If it was as black and white as we are being told it is, why wouldn't we just let officers decide everything? As elected members, elected by the people in North Warwickshire, we're allowed to have different views. Why is me proposing that it be approved any different to me voting against refusal? What Mr. Tobin has just read out makes absolutely provides absolutely no rationale for why a refusal can't be moved on planning grounds, which is what I've done and provided a policy for it. Nowhere in the Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004 and nowhere in the Constitution or the adopted planning protocols does it say that evidence has to be provided by lay members of the planning board, elected lay members of the planning board, as to what tests the planning officers might want to use in their arguments for a certain position, and still not got any legislation that says that has to happen.
All I can do, Councillor Farrell, is point you back to Mr. Tobin, who's given you his advice. Genuinely, I've been a member of the planning board for over 20 years, and under all the previous chairmen, all I can tell you is on every occasion I've been asked to provide planning reasons for a recommendation which goes against the officer's advice. On this occasion, the matter is exemplified and amplified by the fact that we're dealing with a listed building. So there are two areas where I think the law means that we have to give a reason. Now, Mr. Brown has explained to you that he needs to understand, as part of the reason for the grant of consent, what weight you're giving to the harm that his report identifies, and also how this fits with community benefit. I'm not trying to stymie the political process. On many occasions, I've been in exactly your place where I wanted to propose a recommendation and found it difficult to do so because I have to abide by what the law tells me. Is there anything else you'd wish to add, Mr. Tobin?
Just to reiterate the point that the courts have made very clear that there's a duty to give reasons for planning decisions. That includes reasons for refusal, reasons for grant, and if there is a departure from the officer's recommendations, the reason for that needs to be given. So that has been made by the court, made clear by the courts in a number of cases, and that's why we incorporated it into the Constitution. So it really is a matter of taking those two factors, effectively harm against benefit, and being able to set out why you believe, in this instance, that the harm is outweighed by benefit.
So, Councillor Powell, I think we have a couple of options here. One is that you can give us some reasons, or secondly, I'm quite happy to take an alternative motion to defer the issue, so that we can come back to a subsequent meeting of the board and consider the reasons for granting. I'm generally not trying to stop what you wish to do, and indeed I've had no other proposal from members of the board that planning permission is refused. I'm just trying to make sure that we do behave in a legally compliant way.
Yeah, I'll move my motion. If the council wants to act as a dictatorship and refuse to accept what I think is a perfectly legal motion, I've sat meetings, councillors, so I'm not a new councillor. I don't need I've been on the planning committee 20 years sort of story. I've sat on many planning committees that you've chaired and been on, and you've moved recommendations, even from the chair and as the vice chair when you were there, that were contrary to the recommendations in the report, and they were after the 2004 Act and the planning protocols that have been put in place by the council. I don't understand why saying that it is not contrary to ENV16 is not a planning reason. Whether it can be defended in court is actually not consideration, because the council, in my view, and Jeff and Mr. Brown can raise his eyebrows yet again, he's on camera so I can see everything that he does, but that is not for me as an elected member to consider at this point. I'm being asked to see whether I agree with what is in the report or not. I've moved, I think, a perfectly valid recommendation or motion that has been seconded, and the council should be able to vote on it. Do not see what is different in what I have proposed to in any previous deviations from an officer recommendation within a report, planning report, including ones that you've made yourself, Chair. Mr. Tobin has not said and provided any legal basis within the Constitution for ruling out the motion.
I don't think anyone's attempted to rule out your motion, Councillor. I'm just asking for more information, and that's perfectly reasonable. Mr. Maxey.
Chairman, just to attempt to assist, I think there are two things here in terms of, I think what Mr. Brown has said, if I heard him correctly, is some sort of appreciation of why the balance is different from his report. And that's part of the reason to give decision. So, as Mr. Tobin has said, the Supreme Court has said that where a decision to grant planning permission is not in accordance with the recommendation made by the planning officer, then there is a common law requirement now to give reasons. So I think we're almost there actually, in terms of the policy has been identified by Councillor Farrell. But I think we need a little bit more in terms of just some, it doesn't need to be technical, it doesn't need to be
a sort of professional judgment. It can be a lay judgment. It can be the sort of judgment that would be expected by councillors, just to give some indication about how the number of material considerations have been assessed. I don't think it's sufficient to say, well, it's ENB 16. I think, in effect, if I can help Councillor Farrell, he is saying that he gives less weight to the things that Mr. Brown gives more weight to. But it would just be useful to know, particularly as the Supreme Court said, that where the decision involves complex assessment of numerous factors, we need some indication of how they were assessed. So, as I say, I don't think we're that far away, but it would be just be useful if Councillor Farrell could set out a bit more how he differs in his balancing of the factors that Mr. Brown's put in his report in a different way to Mr. Brown. I hope that helps.
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think I did that during the initial my initial comments on the site on the application, which it says in the report, it is considered that the gable window does not harm the immediate special architecture of the listed building. The MPPF of paragraph 195 says where a proposed development will lead to substantial harm to a designated heritage asset, local planning authority should refuse consent, based on the fact that our own officers say that the listed building is not harmed by the gable window that has been installed. I don't think we should refuse on those grounds. Next time I'll bring a load of PowerPoint presentations with me, because it seems that the level of disagreeing with officers has been raised to a new standard tonight.
If I may just come back on that point, just for clarification, that isn't what's required, and that's not what's being asked. But it is useful to have that summary at the point of the proposal. So from my perspective, I think that gives us enough for us to put the proper minute together. So we're not asking for all the things that Councillor Farrell has said, but it's a useful summary that he's given of the points that he raises. So I think you can now take that proposal, Jim.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to the vote. So planning permission has been moved to be granted for the reasons stated. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees. Against. Thank you. Councillor Moss. Councillor Moss. You're muted, Councillor Moss.
Sorry, once again, two mistakes in one line. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
For.
Councillor Deakin.
For.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
For. Against. Goodness.
Mr. Tobin, could you clarify, please?
Sorry,
against. Vote against. Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
Against.
Thank you.
So, members, I make the maths being against the motion, so planning permission is not refused. I now need someone to propose a motion that planning permission is granted. So my screen has just gone blank, so I can't.
I'll propose that.
Thank you very much. Can I have a seconder? To move us along, members, I'll second it. So it's been proposed and seconded that permission is refused as set out in the programme. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees. Councillor Lees. Councillor Lees, if I suggest, Chair, that if we take the remainder of the vote and then come back to Councillor Lees in a moment.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Moss. Councillor Moss, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I'm getting mixed messages right now. Yes, against.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify what I'm voting for? We're voting to refuse planning permission, is that correct?
It is.
Right. Against.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin.
Sorry, I haven't had much sound for the past minute or two. Could you just clarify what the motion is on this one?
Certainly, Councillor Deakin, you are voting for planning permission being refused or against planning permission being refused.
Okay. Can I vote for, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
For.
Thank you. Then, if we could go back to Councillor Lees. Councillor Lees.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Sorry. The mic went funny. For.
Thank you.
So, members, that is positive by one vote, so planning permission is refused. We now move on to application number 183 for the Honeypot Cottage, 60 Coleshill Road. We have a speaker, Ms. Jenkinson.
the slide first, the person showed the site in the central curve, but the beehive public houses up here on beehive road.
Can you speak up a bit, Mr. Brown? We can't hear you.
Sorry, Councillor Mawson. The site here is shown in red. The Beehive Public House is here up in the top right-hand corner, with the small area of green in the centre of the village is here. Breeden Drive is this particular estate road here. Number 60 is the house here on the frontage of Coleshill Road, and the site, as you can see, is at the rear of that, with access onto Breeden Drive. And in terms of the actual site itself, or site layout, you can see here it's proposed to put a house at the back of the 60 Coleshill Road, with the access down here onto Breeden Drive. And this is a proposed, you can see the proposed design of the particular cottage here. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, we have a couple of objections to this. We have received a couple of objections to this. One further one came in this afternoon, just to make three. In fact, the matters mentioned in that objection repeat what's been said before in the previous objections and in the committee report. There's nothing new that comes in that particular letter. The report, Mr. Chairman, does emphasise the comments made by the inspector, the planning inspector, from not so long ago, and that was included as an appendix. I just want to stress that the inspector in that particular case, dealing with exactly the same site, development of exactly the same site, had no objection in principle to a house on this particular site. There was no highway issue raised by either the Highway Authority or indeed the planning inspector. And the inspector went through several paragraphs looking at residential amenity, the impacts of the proposed development on residential amenity, and did not come to a conclusion that he should refuse planning permission. In fact, the sole reason why the inspector actually refused planning permission was a design issue, and that's set out on page 3116 of the committee report. In our view, Mr. Chairman, the current proposal overcomes that refusal reason, and thus it's been recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We know, as I said before, we have a speaker, Ms. Gemma Jenkinson. Ms. Jenkinson, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Jenkinson. You'll have 3 minutes in which to address the board. In a moment, I'll tell you when your time starts, and then I will give you a reminder when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you. Your time starts now.
Good evening. My name is Gemma Jenkinson, and I'm a director at Richmond Planning. I am acting as agent and representing the applicant on this scheme. The proposal is for the construction of a 3-bedroom, 2-storey dwelling with an attached single-storey garage. The owners have lived here since 2003, initially purchasing the property for the garden space. In recent years, they've suffered from ill health and unfortunately struggled to maintain the garden and in some effect. They would now prefer to give up the land for ease of maintenance and provide someone else with the opportunity to live in the village. The site falls within the Curdworth development boundary as identified in the local plan and the core strategy. Thus, the proposal would result in the net gain of 1 additional unit within this sustainable location. The principle of development at this location should therefore be considered acceptable, particularly given the previous appeal decision whereby the inspector did not object to the principle of a new house at this location. The previous appeal was dismissed as the proposed contemporary dwelling was considered to be out of keeping with the character of the area. This proposal has been sensitively designed to blend in with the character and appearance of the area. The proposal would result in a dwelling that reflects the form, scale, and material detailing present on adjacent properties, and the change in design is considered to overcome the inspector's previous concerns. The proposal complies with the framework and the local plan in terms of residential amenity. There would be no overlooking or loss of light to neighbouring properties. There are adequate separation distances between the proposed dwelling and the neighbouring properties. The proposal incorporates adequate external amenity space and a sizable garden remains for the occupiers of 60 Cold Hill Road. The internal space proposed meets with the nationally described space standards. The trip generation associated with one additional dwelling is minimal and is not considered to be unacceptable in view of the existing usage along the drive.
Remaining.
And the proposal provides adequate car parking on site in accordance with policy. Importantly, the Highways Authority has raised no objections. They acknowledge that the parking arrangements are an improvement on the previous scheme and suggest a condition that my client is prepared to accept. The application received only a few letters of objection and has officer support. The application has been called in by the Chair due to concerns raised by the Parish Council relating to infill development and highways. I've already addressed matters relating to infill development and demonstrated that the development is acceptable. For an application to be refused on highways grounds, there would need to be an unacceptable impact on highways, or the cumulative impact would need to be severe. This is simply not the case here, and the previous inspector had no concerns on highway grounds either. We therefore conclude that this proposal for a single dwelling at a highly sustainable location within the existing built-up area has been sensitively designed.
3 minutes is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Simmons.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the access, about the driveway. It looks very long and quite narrow. Is there any, where does the ownership for that lie? Is it on the new proposed property or on the existing property?
The ownership of the access is within the red line boundary of our proposed site. So the access will remain in ownership with the planning permission.
Yeah, so sorry for being really thick here. Is that the proposed dwelling, not the existing dwelling? So the access to the property would be with the proposed property on that driveway?
In all honesty, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure that the access belongs to the owners of 60 Coles Hill Road. So yes, going forward, the access would obviously have to remain within the access would be attached to the planning permission, which is within that red line boundary. So that would then be for the owner of 60 Coles Hill Road to advise to. In all honesty, I can't answer that question. I believe it will remain with the new dwelling. It is within the ownership of 60 Coles Hill Road, and then they will.
So essentially, what you're saying is it's not defined yet. So ultimately, 60 Coles Hill Road will own the whole thing, and at the point at which it decides whether or not, well, if it were to be granted planning permission, at the point at which it decided whether or not to sell that property, the land associated with it would then be defined. It's not clear from this planning permission.
Yes.
Is that probably better? Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question for our speaker? In which case, thank you very much indeed, Ms Jenkinson. Members, who would like to start the discussion on this application? Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak or have any alternative recommendations? In which case, Mr Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin? Councillor Deakin? Shall I suggest we return to Councillor Deakin in a moment and see if we've had any issues. Councillor MacDonald?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys?
For.
Sorry, Matt. Thank you. Councillor Simpson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
For.
Thank you. And if we could try again, Councillor Deakin?
For.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, members, even by my maths, that sounds carried. So we'll now move on to application number 204 for Mulberry Cottage, Farthing Lane, Curdworth. I have no speakers. Mr. Brown, would you introduce the report, please?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're also incurred with for this particular application. In terms of the site, then the cottage that we're dealing with is here. Farthing Lane is the road that comes up down from where we've just been down here, comes up here and goes on to that's the main road, which is further to the north. There's a row of cottages here. The objectors come from these residents 1, 2 and 3, as you can see from the number down here. This is the cottage with the garage, and you can see in black here the proposed extension. This is the existing arrangement. This is the porch, which in layout terms is down here. In elevation terms, this is here. That would be replaced at the back by a dining room extension, which you can see here with 2 windows in, and this in fact would be down here. In terms of photographs, these are copied from the application report, and these are from the objector, taken from the objector's first floor rear window. This is the cottage that we're concerned about. This is the garage to the cottage, and you can just about see the existing porch, which here would be replaced. And then turning sort of half a turn to the left, this is the back garden of Mulberry Cottage, and the objector particularly wanted members to see this photograph because it shows a number of outbuildings in the rear garden, and one of the points from the objectors was that there was very little rear garden left, and that if that particular extension was approved, then it would build up the area, in inverted commas, at the rear of their particular garden. You'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, that I don't think that is a material objection which should carry any weight. The actual design and size of the extension is appropriate and proportionate to the building, and therefore it's recommended for approval.
Members who'd like to speak? I can't see anyone indicating to speak, so to move us on, I'll move the recommendations printed in the programme. Councillor Phillips.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Would anyone else like to propose a recommendation? In which case, Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees? For. Thank you. Councillor Moss?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin? Councillor Deakin?
4.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald? Councillor MacDonald?
Apologies, I hadn't unmuted. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Rose?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons?
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey?
4.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. That's unanimous and planning permission is granted. We now move on to application number 215 for 42 Austria Road, Wharton. Mr. Brown.
I've got there, Mr. Chairman. The application is to convert an existing building in the centre of the village of Wharton. The northern part of Wharton is the top here of this little plan, and the bottom end of the school down here in Wharton is here, with Church Road down here. The site we're looking at is here, just down from the junction of Ostry Road with Curlew Close, which is here. The existing building on the site, as you can see here, this is the side elevation, the north elevation, and which is this particular side here, and this is the elevation fronting the highway. Some photographs. This is the front elevation, as you can see. It's right at the back of the pavement on the road along here. The next door property is here. There's 2 doors that go into the side elevation are here. This open area here, which is the subject of the main issues involved with this application, where the 2 parking spaces would be, are here. And then this is inside the building, as you can see, the top 2 photographs, and then this again is a photograph of the side elevation, the northern elevation. You can see here particularly the matter of the footpath, where in fact this juts into the footpath, and it's been referred to in the report. And in terms of the actual proposed development, this is for a 2-bedroom house, as you can see, with a couple of spaces on the side here, taking up that full site. And the design of the house, as you can see in quite some detail in the report, retains a lot of the architectural details which are on the existing building. The main issue here, Mr. Chairman, is to do with highways again. Highways have objected, particularly because of the parking arrangement here. This is very, very tight in terms of the space that's here. Whilst it's measured as 4.85 metres, a larger vehicle would in fact overhang the highway here. Smaller vehicles would not. But I think the main issue with the Highway Authority is the visibility if anyone is driving out of here onto the road because of this particular corner of the building. We may have, yes, we have a visibility display here which shows that particular line. The Highway Authority has objected. Obviously, it is looking at this from a highway point of view, and as we were discussing on the mortuary application last and a few items ago, the planning board will have to look at this as a planning matter, and on top of the Highway Authority's comments, members should be aware that there is a lawful use on this particular site for a commercial car workshop. And it has been used as that in the past, and that use has not been abandoned, as the committee report explains. Now that's quite a significant fallback, because this particular building could be reused for commercial workshop, for car repairs in the next few months or the next few days, if the applicant particularly wishes to do that ahead. So that has to be taken account in the final balance. That's quite a tight balance. It's quite it's not a clear balance one way or the other. But in discussing this with officers, our view is that it is better all round to actually grant this planning permission because the use here is likely to be more controlled in terms of access coming and going, rather than the commercial use, which could result in far more cars being parked along the road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Members who'd like to start the conversation. I'm not sure if your system's working, Councillor Humphreys, but I know you indicated you wanted to speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I would like to speak. Before we get into too much, I actually would like people to have a site visit there. But one of the reasons is you can't. I listen to what officers say, and I listen to what highways say, and all of a sudden they say 4.85. I've measured that particular piece. The narrowest it is 4.1 metres. The parks on it at the moment, I think, was a 208, a Peugeot 208, so a small car. A medium-sized car, I think, will overhang. There's about 5 lines in here about the comment about highways. There's a 5-page report that came from highways. They're very concerned about windows opening onto the highway because it will block in pedestrians walking along the path. People are already parked there. As you show the car at the moment on the picture, it's facing forwards. How would you reverse out of there? So my before we get into too much detail about it, I would propose that we have a site visit. One other thing that I would say is that I had Heritage speak to me this morning, and they were saying it is a building that needs some work on it, but it was built in 1848 and opened up as a chapel, and it carried on working as a chapel till 1928, and when it is considered the only primitive Methodist chapel in Warwickshire. That's what I've only been told today. I can't guarantee that. And in the 70s, it was used as a car park. For over 30 years, I understand, and I've not got any proof of this, that it hasn't been worked as an open garage. But the other point that was made is the bricks were made by a company called Gibson and Canning and are considered quite unique, and something, if they're going to knock it down, they would want to have the heritage people would like to have the bricks included and used. That's for another argument. I believe, first of all, we need to go and look at it, see what the site's like. I think it's dangerous where it is. It will force people to park on that road. So I would like, I'd propose that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding what Councillor Humphreys has just said, having read the report, it seems to me that this is another one of those cases, and I raised it on the Flongley application, that buildings have to be fit for use in the 21st century. And this is a site that I don't think is ever going to become a commercially viable long-term business venture in what is now a almost wholly residential village. It's a 2-bedroom property. That's beneficial to Warton. I accept that there are some highways challenges, but there are already highways challenges in terms of people parking directly outside that building on the road and restricting visibility through the village. So I would move that we move the recommendation in the report.
Councillor Parsons.
Chair. I'm intrigued by Councillor Humphreys' description of a primitive Methodist. I haven't really defined one, but anyway, I have to say I don't like the look of the access there, and I would like to second Councillor Humphreys' suggestion of a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair. It was just some of the residents have been contacting me because the notification notice might have been up and then removed by anybody in the village, but they're saying they didn't even know that there was a notification notice put up in the village to say what was going on. And also residents in the adjacent areas said they didn't have letters to say what was going on. Now, I can't clarify that because I'm only getting telephone calls and being asked in the street, but these are people that walk up and down the village area once or twice a day and have done for X amount of 20 years. So I think if they'd been a notice, they might have seen it, but I can't say it wasn't there for even 5 minutes before it was removed. But I think I'd like some clarification as to whether the notices were up and that the letters did go out.
Thank you very much. We'll come back with the answers later. We'll make Councillor Mrs Humphries. Councillor Simmons.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a brief point. I mean, if it is a building with significant heritage, as Councillor Humphries alluded to, it'd be interesting to see that. But also, it's one of the things is, as Farrell has commented on, is it's worth actually trying to preserve that building and actually have an up to date and modern use. But like many of the others, I don't know that bit of road particularly, but from the pictures, it does look like a slight issue on access and egress, but it was something I would like to see, and I'm going to second Councillor Humphries' motion, but that's already been done.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Just simply, I would like to second Councillor Farrell's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin, did you wish to speak? I can see you're still on mute. Councillor Deakin, if you'd like to speak, just unmute, please.
Sorry, I was trying to lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. No problem. Councillor Mawson, I have you still wishing to speak? Have you spoken, or do you want to speak again?
I have spoke. Thank you, and I don't want to speak again. Thank you.
Could you amend? Thank you. So, members, we've had two proposals again. One to defer for a site visit, proposed by Councillor Humphries, seconded first by Councillor Parsons, seconded, and then we had a proposal against planning permission, saying that the recommendation should be refused, and that was Councillor Farrell, seconded by Councillor Mawson. On this case, I heard the proposal for deferment for a site visit first, and it was seconded first, so I'll put that one to the vote first. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees.
So could we just to be abundantly clear, everyone, we are voting for or against having a site visit. Sorry, Councillor Lees.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
In favour of a site visit.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphries.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Sorry, for.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin.
For.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Humphries.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
For.
Thank you, members. That was clearly for, so we'll defer that item for a site visit. The next item
Chair,
is...
Sorry, Chair, can I make a point of order?
Sure.
Yeah, it's only just to clarify. I think you said before the vote that my motion was for refusal of the planning permission. My proposal was for approval of the planning permission. Just wanted to correct the record.
My apologies, Councillor Farrell. You're absolutely right. That was my mistake. I'm sorry if I misled anybody. Would you want to start the vote against? The vote again, Councillor Farrell, so that everyone is clear?
Oh God, no, definitely not.
Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to application number 236 for land between Homefield and Oakdean, Bennett's Road, North Crawley. We have Mr. Derek Beverley who'd like to speak, but before so, would you like to introduce the report, Mr. Brown?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The photograph and the plan that you see in front of you now are repeats from the agenda paper, page 3156. The red site down here is the application site, and the aerial photograph shows that replicated here in red. The green plot of land here is the site of an existing bungalow, which Planning Commission has been granted for its replacement with a larger bungalow. It was granted 18 months ago, so therefore there is a larger bungalow on that particular site at the present time. The application site, as you can see, is this L-shaped site here. The position of the new house which is being proposed is roughly in this position, but I'll draw that to your attention. Here we go. That's the new bungalow, Mr. Chairman, and you saw the other houses that are on the plan a minute ago. This is the location of the proposed house. The garage is here at the front with the drive coming off the road. You can see it's two compartments. If you see it, it is probably the best way to describe it. And as you can see here with the link in between. And then in terms of the elevations, which I had a minute ago, here we go. That's the elevations of the particular single-storey, two containments, if you like, two almost bungalows joined with a central location here at the front. In terms of the application, Mr. Chairman, then the report goes through at some length as to whether this is appropriate or inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The question of whether that is appropriate or inappropriate has gone through several phases, several paragraphs in the report to outline all the potential possibilities where this might be appropriate or inappropriate. We've gone through the exceptions as to whether this is limited infilling in a village. We conclude that this is not limited infilling because of the size and depth of the site, and it's not a village, it's just a row of houses, it's not in the village of Crawley. We've also then looked at length as to whether this should be treated as previously developed land. And there's quite an extensive paragraph on that on page 3159, with the conclusion that we do not think it is PDL. And therefore, the conclusion from that analysis, Mr. Chairman, is that this is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and therefore should be refused Planning Commission. The applicant's considerations are outlined in the report on 3161. The applicant's case there is outlined in 3 or 4 paragraphs, and a weight is given to those particular considerations. Members have to determine the final planning balance as to whether or not the applicant's considerations clearly outweigh the harm which comes about because of the inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And you can see there, Mr. Chairman, on page 3162 of the report, that we give 2 or 3 reasons as to why we consider they do not clearly outweigh the harm, and therefore that results in the recommendation of refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So we need to move to our speaker, Mr. Beverley. Mr. Beverley, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Beverley. In a moment, you're going to be given 3 minutes to address the board. I'll tell you when your time starts, and I should also remind you when you have 1 minute remaining. Your time starts now. Mr. Beverley? Mr. Beverley? Beverly, I'm not sure whether you're on mute and you're trying to speak.
Mr. Beverly, you have just muted. If you unmute. Thank you. Would you like to speak now?
Joe, would you like to start the time again? Thank you, Mr. Beverly.
We can't hear you, Mr. Beverly. Yeah. Okay, members, what I think we should do is defer this item until later into the agenda so we can understand if there's an issue with Mr. Beverly's connectivity. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to move to application number 245, land to the rear 50 New Street, Dordon. We have a further speaker, Mr. Owen Carvalho. Mr. Brown, would you introduce the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is land to the rear of New Street in Dordon. This is New Street, and the parallel road of Long Street goes through here, with the line of terraces along New Street and the line of terraces along the Long Street here. The application site is at the rear, which is this particular rectangular area of land, and includes the access next to number 40 New Street onto the particular road here. So the access is down here and then into here, which is a parking area for some garages, as you can see, and then the new bungalow would be here. And then in terms of the actual the design of the bungalows, you can see it's a dormer bungalow, 1.5 stories tall. In terms of the report, members will have received a note, which I understand has been circulated to members directly, which in fact is a rebuttal of several of the matters that have been raised in the committee report, and therefore I don't intend to go through those one by one. Members will be able to read that and can come to their own judgments. In this particular case, the County Council's Highway Authority objects. The main concern is the intensification of the access onto New Street, and the very substandard existing access arrangements, and particularly the visibility when exiting or entering that particular egress. There has been reference to a passing place along that access road. It's towards the bottom end of that access. I have to point out that that is not in the applicant's control. Therefore, in fact, that could be removed without reference to the applicant or indeed to the planning situation. Again, in this particular case, Mr. Chairman, the County Council has given a clear highway view. I don't think, in this particular instance, there's a planning consideration that reduces that weight. As we've indicated already in previous reports this evening, there have been planning considerations which have reduced the weight given to the highways. I do not believe that that's the case here. It's all about the intensification of a significantly substandard access onto New Street. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carvalho, hopefully you can hear us, in which case, welcome to the meeting. Mr.
Yes,
Tony.
I can hear.
Excellent. Mr. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Carvalho. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes to address the board. I will tell you when your 3 minutes starts, and I will also tell you when you have 1 minute remaining. Okay. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I hope you've had the chance to look at the presentation which I sent recently for members. Both Greta, my wife, along with 2 daughters, have lived in Dordon for more than 20 years. We like this village so much that we have acquired land over the years because we wanted to build a single new home to our liking in the village. I will address the main concern raised by the planning officers, namely urban design and highway safety. On design, the bungalow would be situated at the rear garden of terrace housed in Long Street and New Street. It will not be visible and will not impact on the terrace character of these streets. The planning board has already approved the area behind the court to build 12 houses. Thus, the historic pattern of separation between these two streets will, in any case, be destroyed by this more intensive residential development. The description of this bungalow as being shoehorned into the site is rather unfair, given how many new houses are going to be built on the rear of the core. The planning officer states that the bungalow at 18 New Street was approved by planning under a different policy regime, but he does not make it clear how the current policy regime has changed and why that means the refusal is now justified. On highways, paragraph 109 states, the development should only be refused on highway grounds where the impact on highway safety or residual cumulative impact of the scheme are severe. I maintain that the impact of the scheme is not so severe that the refusal is justified. We have been using this drive on a daily basis to exit from our garage and drive into New Street. There has never been any accidents. Unlike the core residential development, this single building would not intensify current use of this driveway, nor would it cause more congestion in New Street. The area of land is 450 square meters, and as illustrated by the photograph, has ample space for parking and vehicle maneuvering. In conclusion, I ask you to approve this application and allow my wife, family, and I can realize our long-term dream to build a lovely new home in Dordon, which is affordable for us. Thanks once again for your time. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carvalho. Members, does anyone have any questions for our speaker? I can't see any hands raised, members, so Mr. Carvalho, thank you very much indeed. Members, I have to say I've been contacted, and the planning department have been contacted by Councillor Andy Wright and I think Councillor Jackie Chambers, both of whom have independently asked for a site visit. As they both represent the area in different capacities, I'd like to test your view as to whether we should have a site visit, so I'll propose deferment for a site visit on their behalf. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak before we move to deferment for a site visit? Or say before we vote on a site visit? I can't see anyone indicating, so Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin. Councillor Deakin.
You've got real problems there, haven't you?
Councillor Deakin at the moment. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
For. For.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Deakin, I don't know whether you're able to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, that item is unanimous, so it will defer for a site visit. I understand we have Mr. Beverley with us now. Is that right? In which case, I hope, welcome to the meeting, Mr. Beverley.
Mr. Derek Beverley
is now joining.
Okay, so Mr. Beverley, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Mr. Beverley. We're getting a bit of feedback at the moment.
I'm afraid it's not good enough, is it?
Hello.
Mr. Beverley?
Hello.
I think you need to, Mr. Beverley, I think you need to mute your YouTube, or somebody needs to mute YouTube, because I think we're getting feedback on this.
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beverley. Okay, now I don't think that you heard what I said previously, so I'll repeat it now. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. I will tell you when the 3 minutes starts, and then I shall give you a reminder when you have 1 minute remaining. Okay? Right, your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on my application. I would like to start by saying the fundamental aim of the Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. This application is to build on a previously developed site. There was a house and outbuildings previously on this site. This was demolished in the late 80s for safety reasons and to stop unsocial behaviour by local youths which were causing a nuisance to the neighbours. This was the second plot of land to be built on in this ribbon development of over 34 houses in this part of Bennett's Road North, dating back to 1923. The unique design of the new build bungalow, with a low roof height of less than 4 metres, in 2 staggered halves, with a glass corridor with views through the middle and on both sides, will enable the openness to be both spatially and visually maintained. You will be able to see the trees and bushes behind the new build bungalow from the main road. Plus, there will be almost 1,000 square metres of landscape frontage, which will also give a very open and visual feel to the development. The materials to be used have been very carefully selected to both be sympathetic to the landscape and to blend into the surrounding area. In conclusion, the proposal is to reuse a brownfield site previously occupied by a house and outbuildings in a ribbon development of 34 houses, which will enhance the area and bring back into use an unsightly site. It will not cause harm to the openness of the green belt. It has also been supported by all of the neighbours and has had no objections from anybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Beverley. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? I can't see that anyone has indicated. So who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to mute. Sorry, Chair, I'm getting really, every time I speak, I'm getting really loud feedback.
Mr. Beverley, I think if you could mute your telephone. Thank you. Councillor Powell, move to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've read through this and listened to the arguments that were just made, and I really want to vote against the recommendation. There's a bit of a habit tonight. I think the application and the arguments that are made are common sense arguments, but having read the report, it seems to me so black and white that in planning law, this doesn't meet the requirement, even if we accept that this was previously developed land, of which we are told under the planning regulations, it cannot be classed as, because on the ground there is no evidence of it being previously developed land, i.e. there are no structures left, not even a brick. And even if we did accept that it was previously developed land, it would have to be developed on the same footprint and basis of those buildings that were there before it was demolished in 1980. So although I accept that Greenbelt should be about stopping urban sprawl, and that this looks like a very good development in planning terms, I'm really struggling to see how we can support it, even though I would want to.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Simmons.
I'm in a similar position actually to Councillor Farrell, in that I can understand and look at the development and actually look at it quite favourably. But again, I'm constrained by the information in the report. Is there any, if there were evidence that there was a building there, and when I say this, I'm seeking advice from Jeff, maybe photographs or pictures, does that serve as evidence that there was a structure there before? And is that permissible?
Mr. Brown?
No, it doesn't, Councillor Simmons. The reason for that is there's quite a strict definition of previously developed land in the NPPF, and I've explained that in the committee report, and we've gone through the particular wording of that definition line by line, and that's the reason why we've come to our conclusion that this is not previously developed land.
Councillor Simmons?
Thank you for that confirmation, Jeff. Yes, and I can see that there's in the report that. However, I just wondered whether or not that, whether or not there was anything that would be in terms of us and the applicant could go away and look at what could be achieved through perhaps permitted development within the scope of the existing building, and whether or not there's a compromise in there somewhere, because obviously it looks like a relatively reasonable suggestion.
Councillor Simmons, are you suggesting that we defer the item so that the officers and the applicant can have a further conversation?
I think that would make sense. I mean, I'm not suggesting that I understand all the different planning caveats that could perhaps be put in place there, but yes.
Okay, right. Councillor Powell?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'd be happy to second that, but before I do, from Mr. Brown, I think it would be useful to know, because we obviously, with the Greenbelt application, start with a presumption against approval, that it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And the report, as all reports about Greenbelt talk about, is whether something outweighs that substantial harm. And it would be useful to know from Mr. Brown whether, in an application like this for a residential property, what those topics would be that would outweigh. So like the applications in COSAL for the that were in the Greenbelt, clearly there was leisure use, there was a wider community benefit that outweighed the harm of those developments in the Greenbelt. I'm trying to understand what a single residential development could offer that would outweigh the harm in planning law.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The elements of the Greenbelt are its openness, and there are four particular areas that you look at in terms of openness. It's the spatial impact, in other words, new development where there is none at the moment, the visual impact, whether in fact the proposal is permanent or temporary, and then the amount of activity that goes with that particular proposal. So therefore comings, goings, and residential use particularly would have all the residential paraphernalia and characteristics of a normal site. You have to weigh up then to conclude what is the harm that's caused as a result of those four factors. In this particular case, it's a substantial site, and therefore that would become residential. The garage here is at the front, so therefore that will be quite visible. Our view is, as you can see from the report, that there would be harm caused to the openness of the Greenbelt. That has to be balanced against what the planning considerations are put forward by the applicant, and you can see that those are outlined in the report, and he's outlined what those are. On page 3162, I've indicated three reasons why I do not consider that those considerations clearly outweigh the harm. And the NPPF doesn't say those considerations should outweigh, they say it should clearly outweigh. So there has to be a significant gap on the balance, in other words. As you can see there, the reasons for that are that the total harm caused is substantial, whereas the applicant's case is of limited weight. We do have a 5-year housing supply, so therefore there's not an overriding need to boost our housing numbers at all. And in fact here, as a point which is being picked up by many planning inspectors, the greater public interest here is with the retention of national and local planning policy objectives in retaining the permanence of the green belt and not allowing a development to take place which would harm it. I'm repeating what's in the committee report, Mr. Chairman, but there's nothing further to add to the arguments that Councillor Simmons has suggested.
So to answer Councillor Farrell's questions, are you suggesting there's not a lot of mileage in a further conversation?
No, I quite agree with that. No, the recommendation is I'm very, very unlikely to change.
Thank you very much. Members, how would you like to proceed? As no one appears to be volunteering a proposal to move us on, I will move. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To move progress, I'll move the planning recommendation of refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mawson. To assist, I'll second that. Does anyone else have any alternatives that would like us to consider? In which case, Mr. Tobin.
Chair, I believe that we had an existing motion which was seconded. Perhaps Councillor Farrell correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought he said I prepared to second that. I'm not sure whether that amounted to his seconding that. So I don't see if there is an existing motion, it would either have to be withdrawn or voted upon first. So I don't want to quote that out of context, Councillor Farrell.
My apologies if I misunderstood.
I would have been prepared to second it, but given the comments from officers, it seems like it would just be dragging out the inevitable. So, whilst I agree with Caroline, I don't think there's I don't think there's any merit in doing so.
And from the advice given, I'll withdraw my proposal.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you, councillors. Cool. Councillor Lees.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Moss.
Chairman, I'm not going to vote. I lost signal for a couple of minutes, so I can't get the situation.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. Councillor Hayfield.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
You voting, Aaron?
No.
She's asked you.
Oh, for. I didn't even hear me say it then.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey.
Against.
Thank you.
I'll just tackle the vote now. Mr. Tobin, can you tell us what the result was? So 10 for, 4 against, 1 abstention. Planning permission is refused. We now move on to applications of 348 and 349 for 1 and 2 Nightingale Cottages. Mrs. Helen Lloyd has indicated she'd like to speak. Sorry?
Is now exiting.
So, Mrs. Lloyd, before I invite you to speak, Mr. Brown, would you like to introduce the report?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just run through some slides which are replicas of what's in the paper agenda in front of you. The 2 cottages, as you can see, are here on the south side of Tamworth Road, some distance out of Over Whittaker. The extensions, as you can see here, to both cottages are outlined hatched black on that particular plan. Then here we have as a series of photographs and plans, Mr. Chairman. Here you can see the rear elevation of the 2 cottages. The split between the cottages, as you can see, is about here. This would be the proposed rear elevation across the 2 cottages, and the side elevation here would show the side elevation of this particular extension here, which in fact is that in plan form. And again, that's the elevation which matches that particular plan there. Again, you can see there an illustration, again, with the rear elevation at the back, and this particular extension is seen from the other end of the cottages, which is there. As you can see the flat roof extension here, which is, as you can see from the previous plans. And then the 2 extensions put together here, as you saw on the hatched areas at the beginning. And then these are 2 photographs, particularly asked members to look at this particular one here on the left, because this shows the rear elevation, and the rear elevation here on the right-hand photograph of what's existing at the present time. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, this is a listed building, it's a Grade 2 listed building, and therefore the council is under a statutory duty to ensure that the listed building is conserved or enhanced. The report explains in some length what the significance of the heritage asset here is, and that's explained at the top, if I can get my report, at the top of page 3175. And that's the significance, that's an outline of the significance of the heritage assets, and then members will have to judge the impact of the development on that significance. The heritage officer, as you can see, has done that exercise and considers that there would be less than substantial harm, but that harm is at the high end of that particular category. And the reasons for that are outlined in the report. In essence, it's too large and too dominating, and it removes the more delicate appearance of that rear elevation, particularly at ground floor level. Clearly, that has to be weighed, as the NPPF requires us to do so, against any community benefits. So even though it's less than substantial harm, that still has to be weighed against the benefits, the community public benefits of the particular proposal. As you can see here, Mr. Chairman, that it's quite difficult to actually identify public community benefits here. The benefits are mainly private in order to provide additional accommodation for both cottages. We've discussed this at length with the Heritage Officer, Mr. Chairman, and she's very, very adamant that the recommendations of refusal do carry significant weight in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Lloyd, welcome to the meeting, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Ms. Lloyd. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. I will tell you when that 3 minutes starts, and I should also remind you when you have 1 minute remaining. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name's Helen, and I live at number 1 Nightingale Cottage. My husband Gwyn and our daughter Katie. We've lived here for 17 years. Alison and Peter live next door at number 2 and have lived there for 11 years. The cottage was originally one dwelling and then split into two dwellings, and the character has evolved over a long period. We've wanted to increase the floor space of our homes for some years now and have previously worked with the council to see how we can achieve this goal. The aim is to have a dining room added to the ground floor only of each property. It would be created in a sympathetic style and design, which lends itself to the original style of the building. The construction we intend is green oak and old brickwork, which would be appropriate for the existing building. We've taken this seriously and have spent almost 5 years discussing this between ourselves and the council. The design we are submitting would provide both families with a much needed internal space for a dining room and family room without damaging the style and structure of the original building. Number one is a small kitchen with almost no space for a table within the lounge, and number two has a normal sized kitchen but no other space for dining, which means that the kitchen is unusable as a dining room for more than 2 to 3 people. We're aware that we're both custodians of a listed property and as such would not change the external fabric of the building. No doorways would be changed, all window spaces would remain and no walls would be removed. In essence, the extension could be removed in 50, 100 years' time to return both properties to the structure that they are today. We ask that you consider this plan, which would give 2 families the much needed internal space for dining.
1 minute remaining.
We're united in this plan and we believe that the design, the size, timing and empathy to the existing houses are all combined in a positive application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lloyd. Members, would anyone like to ask our speaker a question? In which case, thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Lloyd. So we now move on to the consideration of the issue. Which councillor would like to speak first? Councillor Simmons?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a huge sympathy for this building. Obviously, looking at the plans, I think one of the things that's quite difficult to see from plans is how imposing a structure would be in the space. And to be perfectly honest, my visual ability to sort of assume size and everything. One of the comments that's been made is that it's too dominant. But actually, I think if we could see and position ourselves in the space, maybe a visit might help and support this application, because actually I think one of the things that's really important is enabling people to live in old buildings, maintain them. We've heard how long they've lived there and how keen they are to protect the integrity of the building, but actually a way of preserving grade 2 and graded listed buildings is to be able to maintain them well and live in them and create space that's usable. We saw from the beginning that it was one house originally, and it's already been carved into, so it's already evolved as a space already. So I think it's possibly worth a site visit. I'll propose that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Chair. I can understand Councillor Simmons' argument about going for a site visit, because to me the design of this building and the extension, I think it looks really nice, and I don't think that planning should be there to stop older properties, even those of significant heritage value, becoming usable spaces for 21st century living, because clearly there is a community benefit, one would assume, in these buildings remaining as usable, maintained buildings. But again, having read the report, it doesn't seem to me that proportion is the main or only single issue that has been raised by the Heritage Officer, and that design and the party warden between the two of them make things difficult. And I just wonder again whether there is a way for this to happen, because there's a section of the report that says that, I think it's at the very beginning, that the principle of extension is not in doubt here, that the principle of extended listed buildings is not in any way one that the council or the law and legislation doesn't support. So if the council and the applicants have been working together for 5 years, we've just been told, I don't understand how we've got to a position where we're having it recommended for refusal. Is there a compromise to be found? I'd vote for this application today. I think it's absolutely, in my view, I don't have a particular problem for it, but I know what's going to be said to me about planning laws, and I'm sure I can find some reasons as to why it should be accepted, but surely it would be better if we could find a compromise solution here, if there is one.
Councillor Parsons?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with both of the previous speakers, and I think, to be honest, I think a site visit is probably desirable, because I think we're probably going to have to arbitrate. This has been going on for 5 years. Then it's difficult to see how compromise it needs moving on. My sympathies lie with actually the occupants of the 2 cottages here, and I think their case might be enhanced by a site visit. So I'd like to second Councillor Simmons' proposal.
Thank you very much. So it's been proposed and seconded that we defer consideration for a site visit. Does anybody else wish to speak before I put that to vote? In which case, Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Fowle, you indicated you wanted to speak.
Yeah, just wondering how site visits work for residential properties during COVID, and what is there rear access to this property without going through the house? What?
Yes, Councillor Fowle, I can answer that personally, because it's part of my ward, and there is a clear and easy access to the rear of the properties. Mr. Brown will organise the site visit and coordinate with the householders so that members could visit in a socially distanced and sustainable way.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tobin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees. 4. Thank you. Councillor Moss. Councillor Moss.
Councillor Moss, you're on mute.
Just to say, on my computer, your screen is completely blank.
Mine too.
Perhaps we'll return to in a moment, Chair.
Yes.
Councillor Hayfield.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
4.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin.
4.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
4.
Thank you. If we could return to Councillor Moss. Councillor Moss, you still appear to be muted.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the vote is clearly everyone else in favour, so whichever way Councillor Moss voted is not capable of changing the result. So let's leave that as a non-vote. So members, the vote was in favour, so planning permission, rather a decision on planning permission is deferred, and Mr. Brown will be in touch regarding the arrangements for a site visit. We now move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the performance statistics. Mr. Brown, do you have anything to add to the report?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy to answer any questions if there are any.
That sounds like a very weary planning officer to me. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Brown on his performance? In which case, I'll take it that you are delighted and happy to note the report, so I'll move that the report is noted. Can someone second that, please?
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And to speed us on, oh Lord, Mr. Tobin, let's go through the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lees? 4. Thank you. Councillor Moss?
He's not here.
Councillor Hayfield?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons?
Councillor Parsons, you're still on mute.
Apologies, yes, sorry, 4.
Thank you. Councillor David Humphreys?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Deakin?
4.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Marion Humphreys?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson?
4.
Councillor Rose?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons?
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Davey?
4.
Thank you.
So that is clearly carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attendance and have a pleasant evening.